Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Crimes, Killers, Cults, and Beer. I'm Bill, and joining us once again is longtime friend of the show, Jody Plauche. Welcome back, Jody. How's it going?
It's very nice. I got a little cough, so I might be hitting the cough button a little bit. But other than that, things are going well.
We'll fix it in post. um, but, if those of you listeners who might not know who Jody is, go ahead and, tell us a little bit, like in a nutshell. Because there's your story on an earlier episode, and you've been on two other episodes as well covering serial killers. So,
All right. So when I was young, I started taking karate, and eventually he was a child molester. He would go on to groom me and my family. He would molest me for about a year, and then he eventually kidnapped me because he owed some money to some people, and he skipped town. Um, when they returned me home, it took them 2 weeks to return him back home. Well, in that 2 weeks, my parents learned about the sexual abuse because I had been denying it, and my dad was very upset about it. And he was given knowledge that they were going to be arriving to the Baton Rouge airport at this particular time. With that knowledge, he took a gun to the airport, got on the phone with his best friend, and when they brought the perpetrator, shot him and killed him, and ultimately just did probation and community service. So he got away with it. Um, I'm also the author of a book called Why Gary Why, because that's what the officer screamed at him when he turned around and saw him holding that gun. He said, Gary, why? Why, Gary? And so, you can go to Amazon to get it if you're interested.
it's a really good read too, and that's kind of why why I had you to come on this particular episode today, because you have a perspective on certain things that happened in this case. Although, I mean, there's differences and everything, but there's a lot of things when I was writing the notes that I was just like, I bet Jody would have a pretty interesting perspective on some of this stuff. So this one's probably not going to be as crazy and off the wall as the other two episodes that we
No, I don't have energy tonight.
did. I mean, we'll keep it as lighthearted as we can, but we're not gonna. Yeah, go back and listen to the Derek Todd Lee episode and the what was the other guy?
Gillis.
Yeah, Sean Gillis episodes. We got a little crazy on that one, or on both of them actually. So anyway, we're covering the case of the Stayner brothers, Stephen and Cary. Now, 7-year-old Stephen Stayner vanished in 1972, and he was just vanished. He was gone without a trace, and he was gone for 7 years. His parents never gave up hope that he would be found, and later in 1979, a miracle happened, and Stephen Stayner showed up, seemingly unharmed. He had actually escaped his kidnapper. There was a media firestorm. Everybody was obsessed. This was a worldwide case. Everybody was obsessed with it. And kids hardly ever turn up again after that much time. So, and the story seemed to have a happy ending, and it did for a little while. But 10 years later, Stephen would be dead. I'll tell you how later. And his brother, Cary. Well, if you're not familiar with this story, all I'm going to say is put a knife in that. Because you could make the argument that the Stayner family was cursed. If you made a movie about this story, people would say that it was a little too far out there to be true. And unfortunately, it's 100% true. Now they did make a movie, TV movie about Stephen's side of it, but not Cary's. So in order to tell the whole story, you would have to make a movie about both of them, because, like I said, put a knife in that. Sources for this are the Hulu documentary Captive Audience, A Real American Horror Story, World's Most Evil Killers, Season 2, Episode 14, Cary Stayner. I just gave it away with the title of that documentary. Oh well.
Oh,
Yeah. World's most evil. I got none. World's most evil ice cream truck drivers. I don't know, but anyway, Stephen Stayner was born April 18th, 1965, to Delbert and Kay Stayner in Merced, California. Del was a Korean War vet. He had three sisters and an older brother, Cary, and he died on September 16th, 1989, at only 24 years old. And he left behind a wife, Jody Edmondson, and two children, Ashley and Stephen Jr. Cary was born August 13th, 1961. December 4th. Not a lot to unpack here, although there's allegations that say that this family was just a dysfunctional family from the get-go. And I've also seen other things that say that the family before this happened was, a functioning unit. So I don't know what to believe. So I'm just putting it out there that there's both sides of the story. um, you said you're familiar with this one, right, Jody?
Yep. My
So
mom, I'm pretty sure my mother recorded it. I know my name is Steven and watched it several times. So yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with the story.
okay. I mean, what's your take on their family prior to the um, abduction? I mean, what did you
I've
hear?
never really considered it, but I do know if you have a child abducted for 7 years and they come back, there is going to be
It's going to be different.
some adjusting.
Hmm.
I did go to the Nova conference in Chicago several years ago, and JC Dugard's mom and sister were like the featured lunch speakers, and I could tell that there was a strain between that relationship.
Oh wow. Yeah, it definitely. I mean, anytime you go through something traumatic and everything, it's going to cause some sort of a friction, whether it's regardless of what it is. I mean, but on December 4th, 1972, Stephen was on his way home from school. He was approached by a man named Irvin Edward Murphy. He was handing out religious paperwork and asked Stephen to hand some out for him. And he asked if he thought that his mom would want to donate. He said that she probably would. And the guy then offered Stephen a ride home. He led Stephen to a car and there was another man in the driver's seat, a man who was called Reverend Parnell. Stephen and Murphy got into the back seat and they drove right past Stephen's street, saying that they would call Stephen's parents to ask if he could stay the night. Now, you know, as an adult in 2025, we're like, huh? Really? But you really can't judge because he was 7 and this was 1972. I wasn't even alive yet. I was, you know, less than a year away from being born, but I wasn't even around yet on December of 72. But so they so he stayed the night at the house, and Parnell said that the next day Stephen's parents had said that he could stay the next day too. Which, okay, this guy that he just met on the road, like stranger, his parents are giving him permission to keep his son for 2 days. Yeah, that doesn't pass the smell test at all.
Yeah, he's lying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's just lying to the kid.
Yeah, but if you're wondering, I looked it up too. December 4th, 1972 was a Monday, meaning that he would have had school the next day and the following day. There's no way that his parents are going to be like, okay, yeah, keep him for 2 nights, on a Monday and Tuesday night on a school week, school night. So I was just curious when it didn't state what day of the week that it was, so I looked it up, and it was a freaking Monday. I mean, if it was a Friday afternoon, then might make a little more sense, but no. But like I said, this was 1972, and he was 7 years old. Kay was supposed to pick Stephen up from school that day, but she was delayed, and by the time that she had gotten to school, Stephen was gone. And when he didn't come home, the police were called, and everybody in the neighborhood went out searching for Stephen with no luck. They had not even a clue as to where he could have been. He just vanished. And their location made things worse because they were about 80 miles from the entrance to Yosemite National Park. And if he had been taken there, he'd be very, very hard to find because people get lost in Yosemite all the time. But the next day, air quote, Reverend Parnell said that he had gone to court, gotten legal custody of Stephen, and that Stephen was now his son because his parents didn't want him anymore because they couldn't afford 5 kids. Which, yeah, I want to pimp slap this guy right now. I mean,
Oh,
I know you do. I know you're. I know. I
Uh,
know. I know the back of your head, your back of your neck starting to heat up.
right. Itch.
Yeah. Turns out Reverend Parnell was a convicted child molester named Kenneth Parnell. Murphy was a friend and coworker of Parnell at a Yosemite resort. In 1951, Parnell had been arrested for raping a boy and impersonating a police officer. He said that he did this because his wife had become pregnant and he, quote, needed another outlet. And he had even escaped from prison at one point, but he was recaptured and served the rest of his time, which back then wasn't very long anyway, which we'll get to that too. Um, the family begins passing out missing person flyers for Stephen. Paul was molesting Stephen from the first night, and within 2 weeks, he was full on raping him. And a week into Stephen's captivity, Parnell began forcing Stephen to call him dad. He also supposedly got his name changed, and he said that his new name was Dennis Gregory Parnell. And he then proceeded to alter Stephen's appearance by cutting his hair. And Stephen was clueless, and although he was, you know, he was petrified, and he also knew that whatever was happening to him was 100% wrong. Yeah, and this was at the point when I sent you that message, Jody, when I was talking about him changing Stephen's appearance. I was just like, so, yeah, so because
Yeah.
Doucette did that to you,
Yeah. Once we got to California, once we got to Anaheim, he bought a hair dyeing kit, and I had blonde hair, and he dyed my blonde hair black because he had dark hair, and he similarly tried to lighten his hair, which turned it kind of red. But yeah, that way, if anybody asked, he was going to say I was his son.
right? But one thing that came out later, the initial cabin where where Parnell had Stephen, was on the same street as his grandfather's house at that time. He was right down the street from his grandfather. Parnell didn't know it, and Stephen didn't know where he was. So, I mean, he's disoriented. But Parnell did move them around a lot, and Doucette did the same thing to you. We're talking a much shorter period of time, but still, I
Right.
mean, it still sucks. I mean, you know that at one point he was in the house alone, and he got out and he was on the street, but he was in the mountains and he had no idea where he was, so he got scared and he went back inside. Yeah, he's basically in survival mode right now. And Parnell enrolled him in school as Dennis Parnell, and he did well in school, and he even made the football team. Um, he was not going. He was going along to get along. And for the record, I'm not going to refer to him as Dennis at all in this. I'm going to. His name is Steven Stayner, and that's what I'm going to call him. And I know his name is Steven Stayner,
Yeah.
so put a knife in that. But Parnell wasn't the best role model. He let Stephen smoke, and he even obviously it wasn't that's an oxymoron of a statement right there. But
He was letting him have sex at 7 years old.
yeah, letting him smoke and letting him drink and everything. He This is another thing, Jody. He even taught Stephen how to drive,
No, of course.
and I mean, Doucette kind of taught you how to drive a little bit, from what I remember about that story. But yeah, it just there's so many things that, I mean, I've heard podcasts where they like detail like all the confession and everything that came out in court. I'm not doing that, mainly because I'm covering both stories, Stephen and Cary's. So we don't need to hear the court. We don't need to hear everything based on Stephen's testimony in court. We don't need to hear that. It's just kind of like mm, just the facts. you know. But
Right.
Parnell was constant love bombing him, and Stephen eventually kind of became, I'm not going to say happy, but comfortable with the situation. He accepted the narrative that his parents didn't want him, and that Parnell was basically a savior, and he was brainwashed. Parnell also wasn't big on hygiene. Stephen would constantly go to school in dirty clothes, and it was obvious that he didn't bathe very often. So This guy's a real piece of shit.
Oh well,
But,
what first thing that gave it away was kidnapping a 7-year-old.
huh?
I said the first thing that gave it away was him kidnapping a 7-year-old.
Oh yeah. Or what he did when in the 50s with the other kid, and it's just like when he made that comment, to the police when he was when he was arrested or when he was convicted of that back in the 50s about just needing a different outlet. It's like, okay, so you chose a kid. You could have just gone and picked up a hooker.
Right.
I mean, damn. Hell, you could
Or
have
just
even,
made a fist.
yeah. I mean, he could have even, I mean, if he wanted to, like, I'm sure he could have located a male hooker. Although that was in Texas, so maybe not.
I'm
Maybe.
sure they had them back then too.
Oh, probably. Lots of people are in the closet. Parnell also had a hair trigger temper, um, and but he knew how to manipulate Stephen with all the love bombing and everything. I mean, Stephen had basically buried his feelings down and compartmentalized them and everything. Just to help him get through the ordeal that he was going through. But false leads were abundant, and they all had to be followed up on just in case. One douchebag in prison thought that the Stayner family needed closure and confessed to killing Stephen by chopping him up and then burying him in the mountains. They gave a location where he allegedly did this, and searches turned up nothing. I mean, that guy is just as much of a piece of shit as Parnell.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, oh, you want closure? I chopped up your kid. Somebody needs to chop him up. I don't care if he was in there for jaywalking. You don't do you don't fuck with people like that.
Who's the psychic? Sylvia, what was her last name? Brown? Sylvia Brown. She told Sean Hornbeck's parents that he was dead and in water somewhere. And then he ended up turning up being alive.
Yeah, there was um there's been a lot of like high profile psychics and everything. There was in this story as well. I mean, it was brought up that psychics were brought in, but it didn't really give any detail. It just said that psychics were giving their 2 cents worth and everything. But there's been a lot of them, and Miss.
And that's crazy that someone would go, let's go get the psychic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I swear, I'm probably at some point going to do an episode on Miss Cleo, because that woman. I mean, and I don't know if psychics are like if there is a such thing as a legit psychic or not. I don't know, but if there is, people like Miss Cleo, they're not doing the legit ones any favors, 'Cause-
I'll go on the record if my face hasn't indicated enough that I do not believe in psychics.
yeah, I mean, okay, I don't either, but I was just kind of given the benefit of the doubt in case there is somebody out there that is somehow connected, because I'm also, I also believe anything's possible to an extent. So, yeah, just credit where credit's due, I guess, if there is a really, a legit one, but there probably isn't. It's like one time, I was with my ex, and you know, she was wondering how they do it, and I'm like, they ask probing questions. They ask you probing questions, and then they make based general generalizations based on what you say and everything that can make it seem like they know that, like they're have some sort of access into your life. Like at the time, Tom Brady had just went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm like, okay, let's take Tom Brady for example. Let's pretend I know nothing about Tom Brady, but let's say I'm a psychic. I know nothing about him, and and he went to me wondering. He came to me wondering if it was going to be a good situation for him and everything. And so I started. I don't remember. I wish I had recorded it because it was brilliant, but now I can't really remember anything I asked. But I just started asking questions and everything, and by the end of it, she could, my ex could see what I was, what I was getting at. So I'm like, that's how they do it. That's exactly how they do it. But Anyway, hashtag, but I digress. But when Stephen was 9 years old, Parnell had hooked up with a woman, Barbara Matthias, and over 18 months, he and Barbara raped Stephen together 9 times. All this time, Parnell was trying to lure another boy, but was unsuccessful. Matthias later said that she had no idea that Stephen had been kidnapped. Bullshit. I mean, but she still raped him. Like, so I guess that makes it less not okay. It's like, what the hell? I didn't know, but you're raping him. You're raping a kid. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
even if she didn't know, yeah, you're having sex with a 8, 9 year old. Uh, you know that's wrong.
Right. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. I mean, that part about knocked me out of my chair when I got to that, because I was just like, really? It doesn't matter whether you knew he was kidnapped or not. Yeah, it's possible that she didn't, because he probably, if he had just met this guy, he could have been saying, "Oh, well, this is my son," and she could have. I could see her believing him, but at the same time, she's raping the kid. They're raping the kid.
Yeah, Libby Dunn is beautiful, and if she was like, "Hey, I'll let you have sex with me, but you gotta fuck my 7 year old brother," that's not happening. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
you know it's wrong.
yeah.
So don't use that. That's what a terrible excuse. I didn't know he was kidnapped.
I didn't know he was kidnapped. Okay,
Did
did
you know he was 8?
did you know? Uh,
You didn't notice he didn't have any pubes? And this is back in the 70s, and they all had adults had pubes back then.
yeah, and I was thinking that, but you said it, so. But oh man. But meanwhile, Cary Stayner, Stephen's older brother, was feeling ignored. His younger brother was the focus of all the attention and everything, and he also had three younger sisters, but put a knife in that. As some of us know where this is going. um,
That's kind of how the JC Dugard's mother and sister's relationship was. She was like the whole time JC Dugard was gone, she's like, "Oh my JC, where's my JC?" And then now that she's back, she's like, "Oh, JC's back, JC's back." So the sister just feels ignored.
yeah, I mean, and I mean, you can make the case that's neglect or whatever, but in that situation, I'm going to give the parents a pass, because put yourself in their shoes. I mean, I could just imagine what your mom and dad were going through, you know, but they're going through this for 7 fucking years. I mean, yeah, and it's just not to mention, Jeff was having you taunt your parents by making phone calls and stuff, saying that you were somewhere where you weren't. But luckily, he was an idiot.
Yeah, not the best kidnapper. I wouldn't
uh,
recommend him. I said I wouldn't recommend him as a kidnapper. Cornell was good.
yeah, he got away with it, and he like I said, Steven escaped. So if he hadn't escaped, it could have been much longer. But he probably, we're going to get to that, because that ties into something that you told me when we were talking about your case. So, but um, but his dad treated him badly, and he felt bad. His dad said that he felt bad about neglecting Cary years later, like, but like I said, he didn't know how to cope with Steven's disappearance, and it, you know, not on purpose, I'm sure, but it did get taken out on Cary. Like, there were situations where Cary, where he would be like, you like, if his sisters were going to go out and play together or whatever, his dad would say things to Cary like, "You're going to keep your eye on the girls, right?" That's just it's wrong, but still, I mean, Cary wasn't even with Steven when Steven was taken.
Right.
So it was definitely not Cary's fault that Steven was taken. And even if he had been there, it still, wouldn't have been Cary's fault, because he was, I guess, like 10 or 11 at that point. What's he gonna do against two grown men? You know?
Right.
So, I guess that when this happened, he would have probably been at least in his mid to late 40s when this happened. because he, that arrest for the first kidnapping that he did was back in the 50s. So you got to figure he's at least in his mid 20s at that point, So there were times when Stephen did drop hints to his friends. He would tell people that his mom didn't even know that he existed. He also told friends that he wanted to go back to his real home, and he was trying to reach out, but he was just too scared. He started, but he couldn't he couldn't close the deal. You know what I mean? But
Right.
but but at the same time, they Parnell wasn't being hidden. He was seen regularly with Stephen and everything, and they seemed like a normal father and son relation, unit or whatever. And so the people that were friends of Stephen back then, when it all came out, they're like, they really did have no idea that Stephen had been kidnapped. I mean, there were a couple people on that documentary. There's just like, if I wish I could go back and pick up the clues and everything, pick up the signs that he was sending and everything, and like they've got survivor's guilt and whatnot, and I kind of I feel for them because they 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 had no idea, but they weren't raping him either.
Right.
So, but the last place that Parnell took Stephen was Point Arena. It was a one-room shack in the middle of nowhere. And so at this point, he was isolated completely. And Stephen had become, starting puberty at that point. Parnell was trying to get Stephen to help him find another boy because I guess, he's starting to get older and everything. And he's not going to want Stephen anymore. But
Right. Stephen's aging out. That's the pedophile's biggest
Mhm.
problem is that when they're attracted to like say, 6 years old to 10 year olds, when that kid becomes 11, 12, they don't want that kid anymore, especially when they start going through puberty.
Right.
And that's the biggest problem. Basically, that's what got him caught because he's trying to figure out a way to kind of pass Stephen off and move on to another little boy. And by that time, and this is going to sound nuts, but by that time, Stephen probably felt like he was being, uh, you know, I don't want to say disrespected, but uh, probably it's some type of jealousy that he was no longer going to be the number one
Hmm.
love object.
Yeah.
Not that he wanted to be, not that he wanted to be his love object. Just there was probably an emotional connection to where he felt like he was being betrayed because Ken was trading him in.
Yeah. It's like, I saw an old Family Circus cartoon that this just reminded me of, just like when they went from the station wagon to the minivan. It's just like it was a Sunday cartoon where they had like a full comic strip and everything. So you have like several panels of them with the station wagon, you know, like on vacation and whatnot and everything, and then all of a sudden they're at the dealership driving away in the minivan, and you see the car like crying, you know. So anyway, but that's just what I thought of when you said that. But he's, but still, I mean, you were telling me that you thought that, I mean, maybe not have thought it at the time, but you thought that, you know, Doucette was going to be done with you, and he probably would have, probably, if he hadn't gotten caught, you might not have come back.
Yeah, who knows what he would have done to get rid of me?
Yeah, because you were getting close to aging out as well.
Yep.
Didn't you tell me that he kind of had eyes on your younger brother?
Oh, I'm sure he would have. I mean, he had already groomed a family. All he had to do is just trade me in.
Right. Oh man. Yeah. For those of you who are just hearing me talk with Jody for the first time, Jody does not have any problem. I'm not hurting Jody's feelings. I'm not triggering him or anything like that. You should hear some of the interviews that he does on other podcasts where he talks about his experience. I ain't hurting anybody's feelings here. So, what's the one that you did where you brought them the shirt?
That was the Unsubscribed podcast.
Yeah, you were freaking nuts on that episode. I listened to it. I'm
and
laughing.
and I was completely sober. Yeah, well, maybe not by the end of the interview because we did start drinking on the show, but yeah, I definitely started 100% sober.
No, that was crazy, and I thought we went off the chain on the two Louisiana serial killer episodes that we did. But
The Gillis, the Gillis one, I was hitting hard, and I maybe I should thank you because I mean, maybe that got me prepared to do the Unsubscribed podcast because yeah, I know I went a little too hard on Gillis.
it was fun though. It was hilarious. I mean, but yeah,
Ah, I called murder victims dead. You know what? So like, did we have you? Did I ask you to edit that out?
I did, and I'll edit this part out.
Yeah.
I'll edit that what you just said that out too. This one, but but yeah, that probably did because from the first episode, Derek Todd Lee to Gillis. I mean, you definitely went from here to here as far as how off the chain you were getting and everything. And I was right there with you too. I mean, it was hilarious. but then you went on there and you took it and you went from up here to even higher on the unsubscribed. I'll link that episode in the show notes for this one. Anyway, oh man. But as Stephen began puberty, Parnell was trying to get Stephen to help him find another boy, like we talked about. Steve refused, and he would later say that he had sent Stephen on several attempts and everything, and they failed. And he would say that he intentionally sabotaged Parnell's attempts. So, but one time, Parnell did successfully kidnap another boy. Parnell and a friend of Stephen's, Randall Poorman, kidnapped 5-year-old Timothy White on February 14th, 1980, in Ukiah, California. Parnell introduced him to Stephen as his new little brother. And Timothy was freaking out, so Stephen decided to return him home. He didn't want Timothy to go through the hell that he had been through. And Parnell was working security. Yeah, he worked nighttime security. And one night when Parnell was working, March 1st, 1980, Stephen and Timothy left on foot to go from Point Arena back to Ukiah, which was 39 miles away. They hitchhiked and they got a ride to Ukiah. They went to the police station, and Stephen said, that Stephen told them who Timmy was, because obviously they had been looking for him because this is a very fresh kidnapping, But a cop recognized Stephen, and he brought up a flyer, a missing persons flyer with Stephen's picture on it. He's just like, we've been looking for you for a long time. And he looked at the cop and he said, I know my first name is Stephen. And that was the name of a 2-part TV movie that was made about this story. Timothy and Stephen were reunited with their families. Timothy and Stephen stayed in touch too. I mean, they had a bond, and how could they not? But I think later on, I couldn't find this in any of the research, but I'm sure that Timothy was at Stephen's funeral. Sure of it.
I bet.
There's a statue in either Ukiah. There's a statue somewhere with a bust of like a full life size bust of Stephen and Timothy, lifelike. It's made out of pewter or whatever, but still, it's like full size and everything of Stephen holding Timothy's hand. With a little placard on the bottom of it, on the pedestal and everything, it kind of giving a nutshell version of what happened. But when the police went to the Stayner house at 3 a.m., Kay thought that they were about Cary. because they're like, well, we got news about your son. It's like, well, Cary's out camping right now. What, what's going? They're like, no, no,
Wait,
no.
was he really out camping?
Yeah, well, they said in the interview that he had gone on a camping trip.
Okay,
So I mean, this we're gonna get to.
practice. He went
Yeah,
on a practice run.
he might have, and we're gonna get to that too. But he could have. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I can't remember the time frame from when he got back to when his first suspected murder happened. Okay, I've just spilled the beans. Cary became a serial killer. But
Yeah, I, I bet you surprised him with that one.
yeah, right. What, you mean he's not an ice cream truck driver? No. That would be Fred West. No. Um, I haven't covered that one yet. But the police told Kay and Dell that Steven had been found, and they're like, "Well, can we go see him?" Like, no, he's not here. He's at the police station in Ukiah. They're like, "Okay." Steven was returned the next night and was welcomed by hundreds of media, neighbors and like a bunch of media and everything. It was a madhouse. Parnell was arrested, and they found out about his prior conviction. They didn't charge him with anything regarding Steven because nothing happened with him in Ukiah, but they did charge him with kidnapping Timothy. Yeah, Murphy and Poorman were also arrested and being complicit in the two kidnappings. And Parnell was tried for the crimes against Stephen and Merced. And Parnell was sentenced to 7 years, but he was paroled after 5. And in Stephen's case, he got 7 more years, but concurrently, not consecutively. I hate that.
What? I was not familiar enough with the story to know that he only got 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years. This is back in 1988, 1981, or whatever. But well,
Now what my dad did makes way more sense.
exactly. I had that thought too. Your dad's a national treasure.
Oh my God. Well, I will say this. In Jeff's case, he had made a threat. He had said if my mother doesn't meet uh, him in New York with the other kids, that she would never see me alive again. And that right there made it aggravated kidnapping in Louisiana. And that's punishable. No probation, no parole, life in jail. And that's what Jeff was going to get.
Yeah, but your dad did the state of Louisiana and the United States as a whole a huge favor that day. But um,
And he's got a lot of people making TikToks now, making new videos about him,
yeah,
new YouTube channels. I mean, due to social media, my dad's reached levels that I've never seen. Like I think I joined Twitter 15 years ago, and every now and then I'd search my dad, and every 5 days someone might reference him, and no one would get it. Now I want you on Father's Day to go to Twitter
mhm,
and type in my dad's name and see what happens.
yeah,
I'll gain 1,000 followers on Father's Day, if not 2,000.
yeah. I mean, yeah, your dad's legend is going to, I mean, you're still going to be attached to the story, but what he did and everything is gonna far outlive you, and you're
Right.
yeah. I mean, your dad's a hero. Your dad's a legend. I mean, that's all I can say about it because it's the truth. But yeah, I mean, there's all and I was talking um a few weeks ago. I had a guest on, and I something happened. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I needed a last minute guest, and there was this guy who had another podcast, and that podcast folded, and I'm like, hey, I need a story like now. Can you come on? He's like, yeah. So he brings this story about what was that guy's name? Um, Maxim Gelman. He was that guy who basically went on a killing spree in New York City back in 2000 something or other. But a man named Joe Lozito basically took him down on a subway car. And if it hadn't been, got really fucked up in the process. But, you know, Lozito found our episode because he told that story. And Lozito found that episode and he came on. He came on like the following week, and I brought the guy that had come on back to interview, to interview with Lozito. And I actually asked Lozito to come on with you because you came up in that episode, and he didn't know you or your dad by name, but as soon as I started describing what happened, he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I know that." So there's a lot of people that know you and your dad by name, but there's a lot more people like Joe Lozito who know about it but didn't really know the name. you know?
Right. Well, yeah, I would expect most people. I mean, even Joe Rogan was like, there was this a video of this guy walking through the airport, and the father. I mean, so yeah, everybody knows the father who shot the karate teacher
Right. But
by on the payphone.
yeah, I mean, I still, if I wish Lozito had come on. You guys would have gotten along very well, I think. But um, yeah, he wanted to. He was just busy tonight. So, but yeah, he got 7 more years for Steven concurrently. The adjustment obviously was really hard on the Stainers, and the media was relentless, and their problems had just started, and their problems were just being plastered all over TV everywhere. The media followed Stephen everywhere, and even on school grounds. And the media even said that he was behind. They even went, like, on a news report, it was like, well, Stephen is behind the other students because of his sporadic schooling that he went through over the past 7 years. It's just, fuck off, It's like, do you really need to say that? But yeah, it's the media. That's what they do. Yeah. And Dell still wanted Steven to be little Stevie, and he couldn't accept that Steven had kind of grown up. I mean, he's like on his way to becoming a man. Yeah, his oldest sister barely remembered him, and his two younger sisters didn't remember him at all. Which it's, it's sad, but I mean, it makes sense. um, Dell even wanted to keep Steven out of therapy. And some people didn't think that it was appropriate for Steven to be talking about things that happened to him as Dennis. Even the good things, like all the kids and even a lot of his classmates were jealous because of all the attention that he was getting. But meanwhile, Cary Stayner was spiraling downward and nobody even realized it. Start off kind of feeling bad for Cary, but just wait. Just wait. This is one of the saddest stories, but it's also one of the craziest true crime stories that there is, just because of, you know, just because of the two key players involved. Brothers. Yeah, it's literally Cain and Abel. You know.
Mm.
But and here we have another parallel with your story, Jody. Stephen at this point was denying any sexual abuse happened, but that changed, and the police had to drag the truth out of him, because as they were searching the cabin, Polaroid pictures of Stephen nude were found. So I mean, there's no getting away with that. And with yours, it was what, DNA?
Yeah, it was his spermatozoa found on the rectal slides that gave him away. That's basically made me tell the truth.
Right, and they did the same thing with Stephen. Um, I mean, yeah, the Polaroid pictures. I mean, that, it's just, you don't need. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what was going on there, even with Stephen denying it. But tell. I mean, I know why, but tell the listeners why you were denying it.
Um, because I didn't want Jeff to uh, get out in 7 years and come and get me, uh, because I told on him. So people thought I was protecting Jeff. No, I was protecting myself, because as soon as the DNA, and we didn't call it that back then, but
Right.
as soon as that DNA was found inside my body, I knew I couldn't keep it a secret anymore, and I came clean.
Yeah. It's horrific. I mean, yeah, I've been through a lot of shit in my life, but I never went through that. Thank God. But oh, and Joe Lozito said, like because he got stabbed in the head by Gelman, like literally. I mean, he could have easily bled out, and he almost did. But when we were talking about you in that episode, he was just like, yeah, he's like, don't take this the wrong way. He's like, but I'll take what happened to me over what happened to Jody any day of the week. And I can tell.
For those who haven't read my book, there's a chapter in the book where I talk about my godson who lost his leg in an accident, and I said, look, you're 16, 15, 16 years old, you lose your leg. I was like, or you could go through what I went through, and it only is going to last a year. That's it. And at the time, he was in college. He was like, I can't answer that. I don't know the answer. Now he's got two kids. He'll take missing his leg.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, I mean, thank God this didn't happen to you. Well, I'm gonna let you talk about that because the reason it didn't happen to you is because you didn't let it happen. The kids turned on Steven, calling him slurs and everything, and which you didn't let that happen. You started making jokes about it, even as a kid. So it's just like somebody tried to call you a slur, you'd be like, I'll just let you tell it because it's great.
Um, if someone were to refer to me as a slur that you would call a homosexual,
Yeah.
I would tell people I know I'm not a homosexual because I was forced to suck a penis before and I didn't like it. Now, do you know for sure you're not gay?
Yeah. But unfortunately, Steven didn't, didn't look at it the way that you did. But Steven, he had already been smoking and drinking and stuff like that, but um, he got deeper into alcohol and drugs, and he became a bit of a sex addict as well. But and this is while he's still in school. I think he's in high school at this point.
I
Um,
tell people all the time, you can't put the tube back in the toothpaste.
no,
Once you're exposed to that, you know, at a young age, you're going to continue to want it.
yeah, definitely. And we're talking about the drugs and alcohol. We're not talking about the other thing.
All of it, all of it, all of it.
But one day he met Corey at a part-time job that he had, and they fell in love, and they were married, graduated high school, and everything. And before too long, Stephen Jr. or Ashley was the older kid, but and Stephen Jr. were born. Stephen was a great dad. I mean, he loved his family very much. That was like all, like you were talking about just a minute ago. He's just like, I'll my leg. Let me lose my leg, but I love my kids, But shortly after they were married, the TV movie "I Know My First Name Is Steven" was made. Steven, Cary, and all the kids were interviewed, as well as Corey and Steven's parents. Steven had gotten into police academy. And you may not know this, Jody, but he even played a cop in the movie during Steven's homecoming scene in the movie. Did you know that?
I did not, but I mean, I could see that happening.
Yeah,
I
they.
mean, Pee Wee Herman got the role in his movie.
But Corn Nemec, he played Steven. Later on, went to become Parker Lewis Can't Lose. I loved that show when I was, when it was running. That was a great show. But
Never heard of it.
it it was a '90s sitcom. Like a more it came out after Married with Children. Married with Children kind of started pushing the envelope with the more risque stuff and everything. And Parker Lewis Can't Lose kind of carried the torch with that. It was a really good show. I really liked it. Um, but it was more of it was kind of like a different version of like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It was like that, but it was a TV series. Um, but Kay and Dell hated the movie. Steven's like, it's just a movie. But it was one of the highest rated TV movies that NBC had ever done, and it was nominated for 4 Emmy Awards. Um, But the night before the Emmys, Stephen was on his motorcycle on the way home from work. Somebody ran a stop sign and plowed into Stephen and then took off. It was a hit and run. And Stephen was killed instantly. And the sad thing is, like, his one of his sisters was driving by and was in the traffic, in the traffic jam because, while they were like working on it. They actually saw, she actually saw the EMTs working on Stephen, but she had no clue that it was him.
Right.
That's horrible.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But once again, the media swarmed to the Stayner family. Hundreds of people and media showed up to the funeral. And to make matters worse, Corey remarried, and her new husband hated the Stayners. He was kind of a fucking dick. Kay and Del rarely got to see their grandkids because of it. Because this new guy, I guess he's threatened by all the notoriety that his now wife's ex had. So he's just like, no, he's compensating for a small hog. That was a Stevie T reference, a guitar virtuoso YouTuber. But anyway, maybe I'll link that particular video in the show notes for this because it's freaking hilarious. But the more they milked this case, the more traumatic it got for the family. Stephen Jr. and Ashley were getting older, and they were finding out what exactly had happened to their dad, and they were horrified. But the trauma inflicted on this family, obviously, was about to get much worse, because now we're going to switch the focus to Cary Stayner. Cary was 18 when Stephen escaped, and as I mentioned earlier, he was jealous of Stephen's notoriety. He wasn't taking it very well. He was silently spinning out of control in the background. But he would do something that would not only outshine the spotlight on Stephen, it would do far more damage to the Stayner family as a whole. Most of the narratives around Cary say that his mental troubles and instability were the result of Stephen's fame. But that's not entirely true. At 3 years old, he was diagnosed with something I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but it's abbreviated TTM, and it's basically compulsive hair pulling. He was put on medication for it, and he had serious bald spots, which led him to be bullied as a kid. This issue never completely went away, and he wore baseball caps a lot. Although he was a gifted artist and got to do cartoons in the school newspaper in high school, and he was even voted most creative. So, but he also had signs of sexual deviancy at a very early in life. At 7 years old, Cary had exposed himself to a friend of his sister's who was spending the night. It said that he also fantasized about abducting and murdering women since he was 7 years old, and he claimed to have suffered sexual abuse. But we'll get to that. So put a knife in that. One of the initial triggers, according to Cary, was when Stephen and Del were on Good Morning America. Del hugged Stephen, and Cary claimed that Del had never once hugged him in his entire life. What pushed Cary over the edge was when Stephen was killed. He had also been sharing a house with his uncle Jesse, and soon after Stephen died, Jesse turned up dead. Cary claimed that Jesse had sexually abused him as a child, and it was never proven that Cary killed Jesse, but he was a suspect, and Cary denies killing Jesse. I don't know. I think he did it. I think that was his first kill.
Well, but I also think Jesse did it too, because when you were
I do
talking
too.
about him at 7 years old exposing himself, most 7 years old they don't do that. That's a
No.
way of acting out,
Yeah.
and I address that in my book, Why Gary Why as well. The kid has the knowledge of something that they shouldn't. Like there
Right.
was the little girl, she drew a picture of a turtle with an erect penis. I think she was in second grade. Second grade girls should not know what an erect penis looks like.
Exactly.
And so that right there was a huge red flag. So as soon as you said that, I was thinking to myself, all right, now who molested him?
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with that. That's why when we were talking at the in the beginning of the episode, it's just like there's there's sources that say that he was, that the family was normal, and there's sources that say it was dysfunctional. And yeah, and I said we'd talk about it
Well,
later.
having a
So
child molesting uncle is pretty normal.
well, I mean, it's just sources. I mean, I didn't. That's why I did it, because I found both sides. So I'm not gonna make a generalization, and just report only one side of it. But personally, I think, I'm with you. I think that there was shit going on. You know.
My favorite comedian, Jim Norton, he does a child molesting character called Uncle Paul.
Mm.
They had a skit on Saturday Night Live years ago when it was very in the beginning. They had Uncle Roy. Uncle Roy was a child molester. He was babysitting his nieces. They could never get away with this today, but I mean, I actually enjoy the fact that they're in that 1970 what seven that they were shining a spotlight on something that people didn't talk about back then.
Right. Definitely. But Cary began working after graduating high school, and he got a job as a window installer. He claimed to have a fantasy about
Wait,
running.
imagine a peeping Tom gets a job as a window installer. Go figure.
That's like BTK getting a job as an ADT security system installer.
Right.
Yeah, there's BTK vibes with Cary. There really are. Not just that. That one just came to me when you said that. But still, there's BTK vibes here. But he claimed to have a fantasy about running a truck into the business, killing everybody inside, then burning the place to the ground.
Who
Um,
hasn't?
yeah, really. In 1995, he tried to kill himself with carbon monoxide, but that wasn't successful. He then checked,
Loser.
yeah, quitter. He then checked himself.
That doesn't love me enough. I'm gonna kill myself. He don't even kill himself. It's like it just made it that double down. That one was like pi or not pi, but Times Square.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. I said we were going to get there and everything, because I mean we're not going to make fun of Steven, but we do make fun of the bad guys. And Carrie's the bad guy.
That's right. Yeah.
And so is Uncle Jesse. Although I wish they had come up with a different name for Uncle Jesse and Dukes of Hazzard now after
I
reading
was
this
just
story.
about to say, I bet he molested Bo and Luke too.
It might explain some things. Oops.
Yeah.
And that's why Coy and Vance left so abruptly.
The Coy and Vance years.
Oh god, those were so horrible. And the way they just left, it was so abrupt. It was just like, all right, we're gonna, Aunt Susie Q needs some help. We're gonna go help them. All right, see ya. And then that was it. No mention of Coy and Vance anymore. Oh boy. He admitted himself into a mental institution, but he was treated and released. So mental institution dropped the ball there. 1997, he was busted for possession and marijuana, possession of marijuana and methamphetamines, but those charges were
Oh, the
dropped.
meth.
Yeah,
The meth is bad.
yeah. Meth is bad. Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Don't do meth.
Don't do meth.
If
Okay.
you like your teeth, you won't do meth.
But this brings us to where the horror began. Later in 1997, he had moved into a cabin in the woods, and he was living off the grid. He had gotten a job as a handyman at Cedar Lodge Motel in El Portal, near the entrance to Yosemite National Park. He later moved on location into the motel. Actually, it was a hotel, not a motel. But between February and July of 1999, he killed 2 women and 2 teenage girls, and it's believed that there were more. Um, he would go on long hikes, and he would sunbathe nude while smoking weed. And he also became absolutely convinced that Bigfoot was real.
Just very good at hide and seek.
Yeah. He would constantly go hunting for Bigfoot. He's not just out there on a hike; he's hunting Bigfoot, and he would tell people about it too. Um, he wanted to be famous for, and that's a recurring theme with Cary. He wanted to be famous because his brother was famous. He wanted to be famous too. So he was like, okay, if I can prove that Bigfoot was real, I will be famous. I wouldn't have to kill anybody, any more
I mean,
people.
like, what makes you think you could find Bigfoot when you couldn't find your own brother?
Right? Damn. Uh, but February 14th, 1999, Valentine's Day. 42-year-old Carol Sund and her 15-year-old daughter Juliana and 16-year-old exchange student from Argentina, Silvina Peloso, checked into the hotel. It was slow season, and they were literally the only people staying at the hotel at the time. Which I found that kind of weird to me because February up in you got all the snow and everything. It's freaking beautiful in Yosemite there during that time of year.
You want to hear something crazy?
Sure.
I referenced February 14th, 1999 in my book.
You did?
Hmm.
Refresh my memory.
I went to this party. It was supposed to be a Love Stinks party. It was a Valentine's party for single people. That way we could interact and meet other single people who didn't have dates that night. And
And it was mostly guys. There was like
no, it was all guys. It was one girl. She was the bartender at the Hooters, and
of
they
course.
were the two guys wouldn't leave, and I would not leave her alone with these two guys that I didn't know. And so she had gotten really drunk and passed out. So I went and locked us in the room together, and they ransacked her house, and I mean, just threw food everywhere, destroyed, you know, fixtures, and it was crazy. I mean, and actually, she just responded to me yesterday about, hey, I'm not going to be throwing any parties whenever you come next time you come to Pennsylvania. So we keep in touch, but I absolutely reference that day in my book.
But Cary saw them check in, and he had been dreaming about torturing two young girls. He knocked on the door of their room, saying that he was the maintenance man, and there was a problem in the room that he needed to fix. It was 11 o'clock at night, and Carol was cautious, and she didn't want to let him in. Cary persisted, saying it was urgent, and he pushed his way in. But then he pulled a gun and he locked Sylvina and Juliana up in the bathroom. He then strangled Carol to death and put her body in the trunk of their rental car. And they kept saying over and over again that it was a red Pontiac Sunfire. So it was a red Pontiac Sunfire. Oh, I know why they said that, because what happens to the car? Fire. But he then went back and raped both girls. And Sylvia wasn't cooperating as much as he liked, so he killed her and he put her into the trunk along with Carol. And then he went back and raped and tortured Juliana for hours. He fixated on Juliana, acting like she was like a girlfriend of sorts, probably making her think that she was going to survive. It's just like, okay, yeah, he's being nice to me and everything. If I just play my cards right, I'll walk out of this. But he drove Juliana to, in their rental car, the Sunfire, along with the two bodies in the trunk, up to Lake Don Pedro, which is about 90 miles away. The sun was coming up at that point, and he carried her to a viewpoint where he cut her throat and then left her to bleed out and covered her up with bushes and stuff like that. He dumped the car, and then he actually called a cab to take him 90 miles back to the hotel. That's just one expensive cab ride. I mean, he started chatting it up with the cab driver, who was a woman, and he asked her, "You believe in Bigfoot?" And she's like, "No, I don't believe in Bigfoot." And he said, "Well, you should, because Bigfoot's real." you know, there's everything in this episode. There's my entire show title and then some. There's crimes, there's killers, there's even a cult, there's beer, and we've also got a cryptid as well, for a little bonus. This episode's got everything. The cult. The
And
cult.
so this is this is about the time where I told you my friend Joanne was a television producer.
Mhm.
I first met her when she was working for Geraldo, and so that about this time she called me. She's like, I need to do a show called, Dangerous People Who I Have Their Number, because she had contacted Cary Stayner, and she had his phone number. And so there were a few other people. I forget who the other people were. I just knew the story so good, so that's how I remember it. But yeah, she had a bunch of dangerous people who she had their phone numbers.
Oh wow. Might be interested to might be interesting to interview her like on an episode or something of somebody that she had interviewed or whatever. We'll bring you back on for that one if you can hook it up. That might be
Yeah,
really interesting.
me and I don't know if she'd do it, because I mean she's a different animal. But I took my friend over. We took a trip to New York City, and went and visited her. And so first off, she's got a beautiful house in northern New Jersey. Um, there was a patio looking out the back window, and they had a bird feeder, and you had like the squirrels and the birds were fighting. It looked like World War One. She was trying to tell the story, and her husband kept interrupting her, and then she just kind of. I mean, if we can get her on here, I promise you, she's gold.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not I'm not gonna message her out of the blue because how would I know her, and I'm not gonna you know. I mean, if we're gonna do it, you're gonna have to set it up.
No, no, yeah. Next time I talk to her, I'll say, hey, look, I'll send her the link to this and be like, she'll see it, and then now you know. I'll just send her the link. Hey, check out this podcast I did,
Okay. Um.
and she'll know what she'll know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I don't know this one's really this one's coming out really good. I mean,
Wait, and maybe that'll be the thing with the show is you're saying, okay, you used to be a television producer. Tell us some of the people's numbers that you used to have in the background behind it. Just kind of do it that way. That would be cool.
oh, and we do a little potpourri episode on with like a bunch of different people.
Yeah.
That would be cool. We just did a potpourri episode recently, the Dexter episode. We had we did like Dexter characters that were based on real life killers. It was pretty cool. But so Carrie went back and cleaned the hotel room. And 2 days had gone by and nobody had missed him at first. But Carol was supposed to meet up with her husband a week later in Sacramento, and when she didn't show, the husband came to Yosemite looking for them, but he obviously didn't find anything. A few days later, Carrie drove the car back. He drove back to the car. He doused it with gas. The sun fire. He doused it with gas and he lit it on fire. um, he then took Carol's purse and drove it all the way to Modesto, which was completely the opposite direction from anywhere that they had been or would or were to be going. Carrie thought he was being slick, but once Carol and the girls were reported missing, then the purse was found. Police in Modesto suspected foul play and began talking with the people up in Yosemite, the law enforcement in Yosemite. So you're not that smart, Carrie. But this led police to the hotel, and all of the employees, including Carrie, were questioned. And nobody there, not even Carrie, was considered a suspect. March 18th, 1999. Carol's son and Sylvia Peloso were found in the trunk of the torched rental car. A hiker had found the car and reported it, and the bodies had been burned beyond recognition, but they were later confirmed to be Carol and Sylvina by dental records and with DNA. But Carrie was seen as being helpful by the FBI. We're getting a little bit of Edmund Kemper vibes here. But he was showing them all around the hotel, nearby trails and everything, answering any questions that they had and everything. He's putting himself into the investigation, which is why it's a little Edmund Kemper vibes. But finally, Carrie was getting some attention, and he was getting away with murder too. He then, BTK vibes, drew a map to the location of Juliana's body with a note saying, We had a lot of fun together. And then he mailed it to the FBI anonymously. A week later, Son's 15-year-old daughter Juliana's body was found, and the condition of her body showed that she had been brutally murdered and tortured. The FBI at that time had two suspects in custody, and they were putting together a case against these people. Cary, it looked like, was going to get away with murder. But Cary escalated. July 21st, 1999, a park worker, 26-year-old Jody Armstrong, caught Cary's eye. And she loved nature and would go hiking a lot in her free time and everything. Cary saw her at her place getting ready to go hiking while he was hunting Bigfoot. He's out here. I know he's out here. He's out here. Did you hear that? I heard a footstep. It sounded bigger than a person.
Maybe he's just a terrible cook and he wants some beef jerky.
Oh, damn. I mean, if this story had happened, say, in like 2010, all you had to do was have a camera crew with him and he could have been like all over the History Channel. You know? The search for Bigfoot. Fucking Bigfoot.
Oh my God. He'd have so many people follow him on YouTube as he searches for Bigfoot.
Yeah. And accidentally leaves the camera rolling when he kills somebody.
Yeah.
Oops. I could see him doing that. But so Cary saw at her place when she was getting ready to go hiking while he was hunting Bigfoot, and I already said that. She was alone, and he probably struck up a conversation with her about Bigfoot. Like, excuse me, miss, do you have a minute to hear about our Lord and Savior Bigfoot or Sasquatch? No, I don't believe in Bigfoot. What? How dare you? You must die. And that's probably what set him off. He pulled a gun and he taped her mouth and wrists and everything, and he forced her into his car. Joey wasn't having any of that, and she got away and she took off, and unfortunately Cary caught her again. But this escape made Cary very mad. Like, how dare you escape me trying to kill you? Yeah, but he threw her on the ground and he sliced her throat, like literally, decapitating her. But the next day, a park ranger found Joey's body, and this obviously cleared the suspects who were in custody. I mean, sure, this could have been somebody else's work, somebody else's doing, but the chances of that were very low, I mean, but Cary's truck had been spotted near the crime scene the day of the murder. And that next day, that same truck was seen again, so police went to investigate. They went down a path, came to a clearing, and found Cary sunbathing nude. And he was probably making what he thought were Bigfoot mating noises. I'm speculating here because of this guy's obsession with Bigfoot, but ooh, ooh. Here, Sasquatch.
Was he sunbathing face down? Because then that would really be weird.
I don't know. It didn't say. Oh my God! I've seen these memes of these like, naturalists and everything. And they're like, I saw this one picture. He's laying on his back with his feet up in the air, and he's holding onto his feet, and he's like buck ass naked. It's just. This was out in the desert, and I saw this picture. I mean, it didn't show anything. It was like a side view picture, so it didn't show his junk or anything. But I made the comment. It's just, it was out in the desert. I'm like, I hope a rattlesnake comes up and bites him in the nuts. Oh God. Anyway, but Cary's truck had been spotted near the crime scene the day of the murder. The next day, I already said that. They questioned him, probably telling him to go put some clothes on. But they let him go, although they did take his backpack. Cary went back to the hotel where he was interviewed again by the FBI, and he was once again let go. But they did take pictures of his tires. And Cary bolted, and of course he did. They had matched the tire tracks at the crime scene to Cary's truck, but when they went to arrest him, he was gone. An APB was put out for him, and on July 24th, 1999, the FBI found him. Somebody had seen his picture on TV and had called it in. Guess where they found him?
Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
No. Yeah. Too bad he didn't have an appointment with your dad. But he was at a Sacramento nudist camp. And he was sitting at a nude restaurant, like on the premises, and he was arrested right then and there at the restaurant. I, oh man, I could just see that. Yeah, you got me, but it wasn't me. It was Bigfoot. Cary Stayner, you made yourself a meme with the fucking Bigfoot obsession. I mean, damn. But reporter Ted Rollins was sent to talk to him. Cary then did one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard in a true crime case. Rowling asked the guards at the Sacramento jail if Cary would be open to talking to him. Cary initially refused, but Rollins was persistent. He went to talk to Cary, finally Cary just said okay. But he went to talk to Cary, and Cary, during a break from the interview, confessed to all 4 murders in Yosemite. So he confessed to a reporter before even getting an attorney. Cary told Roland that he wanted him to contact movie producers so that they could do a movie of the week about his life. Rollins knew who Steven Stayner was, and to Rollins, he was just trying to one up his brother. That's all he was doing. He's just like, a movie of the week. Well, he didn't get the movie of the week, but he is on a lot of documentaries because of, so he got what he wanted. I mean, he wanted something big and awesome like what Steven got, but in a sense, all he got was, true crime bullshit, as Israel Keys put it.
Wait, let me just say this. Had I known what you just said, I would not have agreed to come on here because that's what he wanted. He wanted that attention. And what you do is you don't give that motherfucker attention.
Oh,
Fuck him.
he didn't get it. He didn't get it. He didn't get the movie. Now he's just on.
But what I'm saying, we're talking about him right now.
Well, yeah.
That's what he wanted.
Yeah, but
in 1999, he wasn't going, I want you to talk about me on a podcast because they didn't exist.
Right.
But, so just, I want to be clear with that. Like, if had I known what you just said, I would not have done this. But I'm fine with it. I'm not asking you to don't air it, but I would not have.
Well, it's just too crazy of a. It's a crazy story, but especially what he refused to admit that he raped or tortured anybody. So I guess he didn't want the public knowing he was a rapist, I guess. And he said to the family, and this is going to make you take back what you just said. He said to the families in court that he was sorry that their family members were where they were when they were. What a dick. But,
yeah, he was killing somebody. Sorry, it was your family member. It was their fault.
Yeah, they shouldn't have been where I was when I decided I wanted to kill somebody. Yeah, fucker. His narrative was that he resisted torturing and killing for 30 years. Or did he? We don't. I don't believe that he did. I think he started killing way before this. But yeah, but he's like somehow enduring all of the abuse that he went through, and he somehow wanted credit for that and sympathy because it took him so long to where it got to the point to where he snapped on these 4 women. Cary Stayner was tried and convicted on 4 counts of murder and other felonies. He tried to plead temporary insanity, but that didn't fly. He was sentenced to death on December 12, 2002. He's still on death row in San Quentin. During sentence, he broke down in crocodile tears, saying that he wished he could take it all back. other murders that he's suspected of in addition to Uncle Jesse are 28-year-old Patricia Hicks Dahlstrom. She had moved to Merced from Washington. She was part of the Sananda Apostolic Church, which was set up by a cult leader, Donald Gibson. Among other things, Gibson was convicted of sexual assaults that were like deemed like part of religious doctrine. It was like one of those religious sex cults, where rape was basically God's will.
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad Steven doesn't decide to be like a hero and just go kill all the child molesters. I mean,
Yeah,
if you're going to be a serial killer, I mean, you should have
like freaking Dexter.
distinct. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite shows. That's why I did an episode on him. But
I watched a lot of Dexter, but towards I forget whatever seasons it was. It got with that dumb sister. I couldn't take it no more.
yeah, I know the last couple seasons it got a little weird,
Yeah.
but she had left the cult and went to Merced in 1981. She was last seen on a bus heading to Yosemite. A severed arm and hand were found in the park in June of 1983. A
Shut the door.
skull, huh?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
A skull was found in 1988, and through DNA they were matched to Patricia in 2021. Now, Cary was friends with Donald Gibson and even attended Donald Gibson's trial. And Patricia had testified against Gibson. So what do you? Oh, look at the kitty cat. But so what do you think?
I missed that. Say that again.
Oh, okay. Cary was friends with Donald Gibson, and he even attended Donald Gibson's trial. And Patricia had testified against Gibson. I think that he absolutely did kill that woman, and it was in retribution for testifying against Gibson.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, there's your cult reference. He was friends with this cult leader. So was he a cultist? There's nothing about that. I'm gonna have to start looking into this guy too. Seriously, maybe do an episode on him, especially if Cary was actually a member of that cult. But in October 1994, severed hands were found in Yosemite. December 1994, a headless and handless torso was found. These hands were deemed to be from the torso. In 1995, the body parts were identified to be 24-year-old Sherilyn Mavon Murphy. There are similarities to this death and the death of Joey Armstrong. And another very similar corpse was found in December of 1994, 33-year-old Denise Smith. 20-year-old Michael Larry Madden left his house August 10th, 1996, and to go fishing in Yosemite, and he was never seen again. He's never been found, and authorities believe that he could possibly, have been a victim of Cary Stayner. But that's it. That's what I got.
That's all I got.
That's all I got.
So they suspect he would have murdered males.
Oh, he did. He killed his uncle. He killed his uncle Jesse.
Well, I mean, I know I'm talking about more like with the way he brutalized the other women.
But still, this is 1996. I mean, he killed the other two women in 1999. So, and it was in the same general location. So that's kind of why they're looking at this disappearance at him as a person of interest. But like I said, no body's ever been found, which that doesn't, unless he weighed it down and dropped it in one of those deep ass lakes that are in Yosemite National Park,
Right.
And that's probably exactly what happened to Michael Madden. But that was that was a good episode, man. Thank you for coming on again.
No problem.
Yeah,
I'm glad I was able to keep my cat off this show for most of the time. She's been locked up front. When I went to go to on the bathroom break, she came flying back here, and now she's all like, "I miss you, Daddy."
You're a cute kitty. But yeah, you're welcome anytime. I mean, if I have something that I think is up your alley, I'll definitely message you about it like this one. I mean, this was a good fit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, I don't do nothing, and we can always make it fit in, any day of the week, especially now that you're at home.
Yeah. So again, it doesn't have to be. It's just that was just when it was initially scheduled, and I was trying to find a fill in for my co-host. But I don't know. I think you and I work well, just the two of us. So I mean, next time if I wind up without a co-host for that particular episode or whatever, I'm not even going to worry about it because I should have known better this time. I shouldn't have wasted all that time trying to find somebody to come in. But so.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks a lot for listening, everybody. We appreciate the hell out of it. Please subscribe and follow the YouTube page, comment, follow us on whatever streaming platform you use, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, whatever you use. 5-star ratings rock, but they help to grow the show. But what really helps the most is word of mouth. So if you like us, tell a friend. If you hate us, tell an enemy. And until next week, later.
Goodbye.